The aftermath of World War I left Germany in ruins, both physically and spiritually. Economically shattered by hyperinflation, the Weimar Republic struggled to maintain order. The value of currency plummeted, savings were wiped out, and the nation teetered on the brink of collapse. The German people, burdened by unemployment and widespread poverty, were desperate for hope and a return to stability. They yearned for a leader who could restore their national pride. Into this chaos, a figure emerged. Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party, seized the opportunity. Hitler rose to prominence, promising to restore German pride, rebuild the economy, and reclaim Germany's place on the world stage. Hitler's message was simple, direct, and seductive, appealing to the deep-seated anxieties and resentments of the German populace. He skillfully blamed Jews for Germany's problems. From economic woes to the loss of World War I, he offered scapegoats for national suffering, diverting attention from the true sources of Germany's difficulties. His ideology, rooted in centuries-old anti-Semitism, drew upon long-standing prejudices and conspiracy theories. This hateful ideology was radicalized and weaponized through a sophisticated and relentless propaganda campaign orchestrated by Joseph Goebbels. Mein Kampf, Hitler's autobiographical manifesto, outlined his twisted vision for the future. It promoted the idea of Germans as a master race, destined to rule over others, and it demonized Jews as the enemy within, a threat to the purity and strength of the Aryan race. Nazi propaganda, led by the cunning and ruthless Joseph Goebbels, saturated German society. It systematically dehumanized Jews, portraying them as parasites, criminals, and threats to the very fabric of society. This insidious campaign of hate gradually eroded empathy and compassion among the German population. It normalized discrimination, paving the way for increasingly violent acts against Jewish people and their property. By 1933, through a combination of political maneuvering and exploiting the prevailing instability, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. He quickly moved to consolidate his power, dismantling democracy under the guise of national emergency. He established a totalitarian dictatorship, crushing all opposition and silencing dissenting voices. Political opponents were systematically silenced, imprisoned, or murdered, and civil liberties were brutally crushed. The vast machinery of the state, including the SS and Gestapo, was turned toward the systematic persecution of Jews and other targeted groups. With total control of the government and the legal system, Hitler began the systematic targeting of Jews through discriminatory laws and policies. This marked the beginning of the Holocaust, one of the darkest chapters in human history. The path to genocide had been paved by carefully chosen words, repeated endlessly and amplified by a powerful propaganda machine, laws, and the calculated manipulation of fear, prejudice, and nationalistic fervor. Once in power, the Nazis moved to isolate Jews through a web of discriminatory laws. Early measures, boycotts, dismissals, and public shaming pushed Jews to the margins of society. The Nuremberg laws of 1935 formalized this exclusion, stripping Jews of citizenship and banning intermarriage. Jews became stateless, marked as outsiders in their own country. Daily life was suffocating, barred from public spaces, schools, and professions, their passports stamped with a red J. The laws aimed to break spirits and force emigration while the state seized Jewish property. This legal persecution escalated to violence with Kristallnacht in 1938. Synagogues burned, businesses destroyed, thousands arrested. Kristallnacht shattered any illusion of safety, signaling that Nazi anti-Semitism would now be enforced with brutality. The regime's war on Jews had moved from exclusion to open assault. The machinery of state-sponsored hatred was now fully operational. After invading Poland, the Nazis forced millions of Jews into ghettos, sealed, overcrowded urban prisons. The Warsaw Ghetto, the largest, crammed over 400,000 people into a few square kilometers. Starvation rations, disease, and squalor were daily realities. Death was constant. Smuggling food became a lifeline but risked execution. Despite the horror, Jewish communities showed resilience, organizing secret schools, prayer services, and archives to preserve their story. Ghettos were designed for slow destruction, stripping away dignity and hope. They also served as holding pens, concentrating Jews for eventual deportation to death camps. For most, the ghetto walls were the last barrier before extermination. The ghettos were a prelude to the Holocaust's most brutal phase. The Nazi camp system evolved from prisons for political enemies to factories of mass murder. Early camps like Dachau and Buchenwald brutalized prisoners with forced labor and torture. With the final solution, 6 extermination camps were built in occupied Poland: Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, and Majdanek. Auschwitz-Birkenau became the epicenter, combining forced labor with industrialized killing. Upon arrival, most victims were sent directly to gas chambers disguised as showers. A minority were selected for slave labor, stripped of identity, and worked to death. Conditions were inhuman. Starvation, disease, and random executions were routine. The process was chillingly efficient: selection, murder, disposal. The camps inverted all morality, making cruelty the norm. Over 1 million perished at Auschwitz alone. Millions more died across the camp system. The camps embodied the Holocaust's cold, systematic evil. The Nazis orchestrated the mass deportation of Jews to death camps with chilling precision. Families were rounded up, packed into cattle cars without food or water, and transported for days. Many died en route. Survivors faced immediate selection and, for most, death in gas chambers. At Auschwitz, up to 10,000 Jews were murdered daily at the height of the killing. Extermination camps like Treblinka and Sobibor killed nearly all arrivals within hours. Jewish prisoners, the Sonderkommando, were forced to dispose of bodies, erasing evidence of murder. Beyond the camps, mobile SS killing squads, Einsatzgruppen, massacred over 1 million Jews in Eastern Europe. Mass shootings like the Babi Yar massacre left entire communities erased. In total, 6 million Jews, 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population, were systematically murdered. The Holocaust was a state-sponsored genocide executed with bureaucratic efficiency. Its scale and cruelty remain almost unimaginable. Even in the face of unimaginable annihilation, when all seemed lost and the Nazi machinery appeared unstoppable, many Jews refused to surrender their spirit and actively resisted. Armed uprisings, acts of defiance against overwhelming odds, erupted in over 100 ghettos across occupied Europe. And even within the confines of several concentration and extermination camps, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, a symbol of Jewish courage and determination, being the most famous and widely remembered. These brave fighters, knowing the likely outcome, chose to die on their own terms, openly defying Nazi power and challenging their narrative of absolute control. Revolts at Treblinka and Sobibor, acts of desperation and bravery enabled mass escapes, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness, though most were tragically recaptured or killed in the brutal manhunts that followed. Beyond armed struggle, spiritual resistance, the creation of secret schools, the holding of religious services in hiding, the creation of art, preserved dignity, cultural identity, and a vital sense of hope for the future. Non-Jews, at immense personal risk, also risked everything. In Denmark, an entire nation mobilized to ensure that nearly all Jews were smuggled to safety in neutral Sweden. While in Poland, underground networks, operating in secrecy and constant danger, saved thousands of lives. These rescuers, later honored as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem, proved that courage, compassion, and humanity could survive even in the darkest of times. Yet, such acts of altruism were tragically rare. Most people, whether out of fear, apathy, or prejudice, were indifferent or complicit in the persecution. Local collaborators, driven by various motives, aided the Nazis across Europe, directly contributing to and deepening the scale of the tragedy. The Holocaust story, preserved through historical records and survivor testimonies, is not just one of victims and perpetrators, but of the complex web of choices, heroic and horrific, made by individuals, communities, and nations alike. Resistance in its many forms was real and significant, but tragically overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the Nazis' systematic evil and the widespread indifference that allowed it to happen. As Allied troops advanced through Europe in 1944 and 1945, pushing back the Nazi regime, they moved closer to uncovering the grim reality of the concentration camps. The world held its breath, unaware of the horrors that awaited discovery. With each mile gained, they uncovered the full horror of the camps, revealing scenes of unimaginable cruelty and systematic extermination. The stench of death permeated the air, a stark testament to the atrocities committed within those walls. Among the skeletal figures were starving survivors, their eyes hollow with trauma, clinging to life against all odds. These were the remnants of a population decimated by starvation, disease, and relentless brutality. The liberators were confronted with mountains of corpses, a chilling testament to the scale of the Nazi genocide. These piles of bodies, stripped of their humanity, served as a haunting reminder of the depths of human depravity. They also found the meticulously designed machinery of genocide, the gas chambers and crematoria, built for the sole purpose of mass murder. These were not just instruments of death, but symbols of a calculated and systematic attempt to erase an entire people. Liberation was traumatic. The survivors, though free, were burdened with the weight of their experiences. For survivors, freedom meant facing a shattered world, grappling with the loss of family, community, and identity. The road to recovery would be long and arduous, filled with challenges both seen and unseen. The Nuremberg trials brought some perpetrators to justice, holding them accountable for their heinous crimes against humanity. These trials were pivotal, establishing the precedent for prosecuting crimes against humanity on an international scale, ensuring that such atrocities would never again go unpunished. Yet many Nazis escaped punishment, disappearing into the shadows to evade justice. And justice remained elusive for countless victims, their stories untold, their suffering unacknowledged. The Holocaust forced the world to confront the dangers of unchecked hatred, virulent anti-Semitism, and the insidious rise of totalitarianism. In its aftermath, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was drafted, a beacon of hope. And the Genocide Convention was created to prevent future atrocities, laying the groundwork for international law and cooperation. The founding of Israel in 1948 offered a homeland and refuge for Jews worldwide, a sanctuary after centuries of persecution. Remembering the Holocaust is a moral imperative, a solemn duty we owe to those who perished. It means honoring the 6 million Jews and millions of other victims who suffered and died at the hands of the Nazi regime. We study this history to recognize the warning signs of hatred, prejudice, and discrimination, so that we may never repeat the mistakes of the past. And to defend human rights, ensuring that every individual is treated with dignity and respect. To remember is to honor the dead, to keep their memories alive and to learn from their suffering, and to accept responsibility for the future, working towards a world free from hatred, intolerance, and genocide.